The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield with support services designed to help seniors age in place, including a Compass Memory Support Neighborhood. More at armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. It's Friday, March 14th, 2025. We gained an hour of daylight on Sunday and lost an hour of sleep that I am still trying to find. I am joined this week in studio by Springfield Republican Executive Editor Larry Parnas. On the phone, Matt Safransky, the Western Mass Politics and Insight Editor-in-Chief. And a bit later, Elizabeth Roman, NEPM News Executive Editor, will be joining us as well. You can join via email, therundown@nepm.org. A bit later in the show, we're going to explore a point raised by the Springfield Republican this weekend, whether Democrats are playing dead in the face of the Trump administration's agenda. We'll also talk about the Democratic National Committee naming its new executive director, who has ties to Western Massachusetts. And we'll delve into the impact a lack of judges is having on legal proceedings here in the 413. But first, Chris Linsky of the State House News Service and others reporting this week about Governor Healey outlining a plan to reduce energy bills. Quote, the Healey administration hopes to save Massachusetts ratepayers billions of dollars in costs over the next 5 years by redirecting some clean energy-related charges that drive up utility bills, expanding discount programs, and stabilizing the local energy supply. Much of the savings is long-term, but immediate relief is planned in the form of $50 credits in April on electric bills for most residential customers in Western Mass. This includes Eversource and National Grid customers. If you have one of those localized electric utilities, you would not qualify for this $50 credit, according to the reporting. Households that, like I just said, get power from those municipal-owned electric companies are not eligible. A $50 credit, Larry. Is this an effective remedy for what's going on here, this challenge that people are facing?
You know, these bills have been in the hundreds of dollars. It was partly because December and January were so cold. But as you just outlined, Carrie, the system of passing along the supply cost and then the distribution cost, it's really kind of shocking to look at your bill. And maybe it's only when they spike like this that people take a closer look. We should all be interrogating our bills. I think the other part of this that I think is interesting is what in the longer term, aside from a $50 credit, can be done.
Yeah, and that's part of what Healey's plan discussed was some of that longer term relief that she hopes to fold in over the course of the next several years, whether it's looking at some of the fees on this bill, because if we look at the breakdown of our utility bills, right, there's the supply service, but there's also the delivery charge, which is often
higher
on my bill so much higher.
Yeah.
It just steams my kettle every time I look at it.
You're not alone.
Matt, for you, the immediate relief from that credit, closer to an election cycle, if I were going to be a bit cynical, I might say, perhaps Healey's pandering to voters here. But while she has said she's going to seek a second term, that's not coming. And, the cycle's not till 2026. What are your thoughts on this move?
Well, I think it kind of speaks to the fact that they know the administration knows to do something. But there's also, and costs have been, one of the most discernible goals of the Healey administration, trying to bring down costs for people. Unfortunately, I think what this also, reflects, and it's not just her, these is years of decisions made by the legislature as well, is that some of this is coming from, the charges that have been added to bills to help fund renewable energy projects. And while those are great, there certainly are options to have funded that, other than putting it on bills. The problem is that, everybody insisted on the income tax going from, a massive 5.3% to 5%, just as an example. I'm not saying they necessarily had to go and use the income tax to fund some of these projects or find something that more directly is related to fossil fuels, the discharge of carbon. It's not necessarily a guarantee that, although most of our electricity probably does come from fossil fuels in Massachusetts, there's no guarantee that if it's these added charges are actually going to reduce usage where we need it. So certainly to reduce fossil fuels. So I mean, this is also partly a response to the fact that they don't feel like they can go in other directions. They can't propose alternate revenue to pay for some of these programs. So it's easier to just kind of offer something, a gesture, as $50 essentially may be, given how high some of these bills are, until they, can make a longer-term change.
Well, and Healy, looking specifically at those costs, those additional fees, she said, quote, "We're taking a close look at them, and we're getting the utilities to remove any that just aren't absolutely necessary." Larry.
Okay, she can say that, but the Department of Public Utilities has to, regulatory zone, make it happen. Mm-hmm. I'm most encouraged by the idea of changing the discounting system to make it usable for people who are middle income.
I think it's also really interesting to watch. So this is being, obviously Healy's putting pressure at the state level, but Jeanette DeForge in The Republican this morning talking about the Springfield City Council pushing back on Eversource coming in to discuss some issues related to natural gas. Just a routine, what I as a reporter have come to see as a routine request. Eversource and other utilities
totally
come
routine.
before the city council, the select board to say, hey, look, we want to dig around because we've got to fix X, Y, or Z. And it's typically something whoomp, rubber stamped. It's done in 2 seconds. I mean, Eversource didn't even send a representative to the Springfield City Council because if I were speculating, because they expected it to be approved. Instead, Jeanette reported that the City Council took all 5 of those petitions and sent them to subcommittee for further review because they're saying it's time to start asking some deeper questions about whether or not these routine repairs, the extent to which they're being passed on to the ratepayer.
As a parent, you probably would never punish your child for doing something unrelated to what's at hand here.
Well, and so to you, that's the read on this, right? Their city council is frustrated that constituents are saying my bills are so expensive, and these utilities, they need to be, we saw a gas explosion in downtown Springfield years ago. We saw it in the eastern part of the state. There is maintenance required on these. And for other sources saying we need to be doing this maintenance work.
Just as on a totally different track, Eversource wants to build a new pipeline supply into Springfield for natural gas. They've been waiting. They were told a year ago to take a closer look at the environmental impact. They haven't rolled that out yet. Maybe this is really not the time to ask for public support for that. It's similar.
Matt, what are your thoughts whether the move from the Springfield City Council, even though it's not related to electricity, it's related to the natural gas portion, but saying, hey, look, we have some questions here. We want to take a closer look at what all this has to do.
Well, this is where I'm going to be the cynical one and state that there is an election in Springfield, and it's a very low turnout. It's just city council and school committee, and it goes without saying that the counselor that moved to put these into committee, Councilor Mello Brown from Ward 4, has a challenge this year. So
it was a unanimous decision by the city council, though.
Correct. There was no opposition to that, and I wouldn't expect that there would be. But I also know, speaking to some counselors, that there hadn't been thought about putting this in committee until Councilor Brown raised it. So it's not. And that's not to say there isn't something to this. But the council also does have, for as routine as these are, occasionally when there's a particular issue or if somebody's feeling like they've been getting a lot of complaints about repatching road that has been torn up. There's actually rules in the city about when certain utility work can be done. Like if they've just paved a road, then they will very much just try to refuse a request to open up a road unless it's like really an emergency. So I mean, there is some waxing and waning in how these go, and counselors have raised objections before of this kind, of some issue that's not actually related to the work itself, but how they do their work. Or I suppose I don't know that it's not a huge jump from that to what bills are costing, but there's definitely a political direction here in as the City Council moves toward November.
Final thought here, Larry, before we move on to judges.
Yeah, you bet. So the council said no, sent it to subcommittee. What Eversource wants to do they say, is address the issue of possible leaks. So talk about collateral damage if there happened to be an explosion related to unaddressed leaks in Eversource's system and the city council slow-rolled it. Okay.
Let's hope that does not happen.
Of course.
All right. Well, the next story we're going to take a look at this morning, Stephanie Barry in the Springfield Republican recently reported about the judge shortage and how that's stymieing court operations here in Western Massachusetts. Quoting Stephanie's reporting, a series of retirements and the death of a local Superior Court judge have left a deficit of judges in the 4 western counties of the state, a gap blamed in part on geography and politics. What some judges privately call a public safety crisis has unfolded, with about 100 pending murder cases in the Western courts, according to available statistics. There are about as many murder cases in Suffolk County, where there are 9 Superior Court seats. Larry, do you recall what prompted Stephanie to take a look at this?
Judge Jane Mulqueen had advised the Superior Court system around here that there could be problems come April when a rotation kicks in. As these, the number of murder cases are stacked up waiting to be processed. She also heard from a judge who privately had expressed concern about this.
And there are 11 seats, but currently 7 are filled, according to Stephanie's reporting. Matt, if memory serves, you're an attorney. I don't recall the area of law that you specialize in, but are you aware of the impact of this shortage?
Well, I mean, it depends on how your interaction with the court system is. So, I mean, I think that anybody who's litigating on a regular basis might notice. I mean, part of the backlog is definitely still COVID overhang. I mean, I think that's only just now starting to get out of the system. But it wasn't like the litigation process moved at warp speed before there was a pandemic. So
true.
So what you will definitely see is, hearings being scheduled, hearings for routine matters that require to go on the record, that require argument, et cetera, to stack up either very far out or they get bumped very easily. A couple weeks ago, I reported on the lawsuit that former Mayor Dominic Sarno had against his aide. That hearing had been bumped originally because it had been scheduled for earlier in the year. It had been bumped because of a jury selection taking too long. So, I mean, the consequences can be go well beyond just the criminal trials. It also affects the ability for the civil litigation system to work, and that has impacts on clients. It has on parties, I should say, and it has an impact on, frankly, delivery of justice. It has an impact on people's bottom line because the end of a case could mean a money judgment, for example. So, I mean, these impacts are not necessarily just about criminal justice. It can be about just the appropriate movement of the legal system, period, and that can affect a much broader group of people, not just those that are victims of crimes.
And some people have been critical of Governor Healy, saying she hasn't been quick enough to nominate more people. A spokesperson told Stephanie that the governor's record on this she's nominated 63 judges since taking office, including 12 to Superior Court. Larry, you had thought.
Well, there's a box here. On one end is end of a box. On one,
side.
Maybe the top of it is that there's this age 70 mandatory retirement rule
Absolutely.
for judges. That happens. You turn 70, and they have a party for you.
Hopefully, there's cake.
The system runs really, really slowly, as judges told Stephanie in that story. To identify and vet and review and approve judges. The story reported that there are 2 nominees that are on the governor's desk. So this could be
from
addressed.
Western Mass.
From Western Mass, yeah.
Although Tara, the governor's council
Jacobs.
member who was quoted in the story didn't want to name names, so we don't know on the record for sure who those folks are, but potentially some more folks in the Western Mass pipeline. It's curious, Larry, to me, you pointed out the age, the cap, 70 for judges. Interesting to me that judges have a cap. However, lawmakers who are creating those laws, I don't believe that there is an age limit for those folks.
I want to throw in, too, that Healy's been out here a lot. I mean, she jumped on the courthouse problem and that's moving forward to rebuild the Roderick Ireland Sick Courthouse. She was here this week meeting with business leaders. She appointed a Western Mass Rural Affairs Director. She's paying attention.
Yeah, and while typically, or as has been the case in years past, there's been people, and still people are critical of Healey, that people are not, elected leaders are not in Western Massachusetts enough, not engaged enough in the process. All right, well, this issue will certainly continue, and we'll continue to follow it here on The Rundown. We are going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere, because still ahead, we're going to discuss Pittsfield City Council's decision to push back on the national DEI purge, plus questions about how the Democrats are comporting themselves these days as the DNC taps a new executive director with Western Mass ties. This is The Rundown on 88.5 NEPM. Carrie Saldo. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. I'm Carrie Saldo, joined by the Springfield Republican Executive Editor Larry Parnas, Matt Safransky, Western Mass Politics and Insight Editor-in-Chief, and NEPM News Executive Editor Elizabeth Roman. The first time you're joining us in your new capacity.
Yeah,
welcome. Thanks for being
Larry
here.
And I.
So we're going to discuss Roger Lau, who was recently promoted to Executive Director of the Democratic National Committee. He graduated from UMass Amherst and worked for Western Massachusetts politicians and in national politics for years. Among those, he's worked for Congressman Richard Neal and Senator Elizabeth Warren. NEPM's Kerry Healey discussed the future of the Democratic Party with Lau, and he mentioned one change for the DNC, and it will be starting discussing more town halls, bringing more town halls to people, and not wanting to wait until closer to a more traditional campaign period. The point he made, the time is now. Here's a bit more of what he said to Healey.
And when I think about the relationships in my own life, if I only call my mom on Mother's Day or on her birthday, if I only send flowers to my loved ones on special occasions, that's not building a relationship, right? And we shouldn't be treating voters the same way, right? We can't just be calling them 2 weeks out in an election, asking them to commit to us. We need to start that conversation early. And as we're working towards 2028, we're going to start doing that now.
Send your mom flowers now, right?
Always.
Liz, what's your takeaway from what you heard him talking with Kerry Healey about?
Yeah, I mean, first off, shout out to Kerry Healey. I'm so proud of our newsroom, and I think she came in with some really thoughtful questions. Not necessarily, I don't know that he got into specifics about anything. It was definitely more of a broad conversation on what he plans to do, but maybe it's because it's early on, and the party is really divided, and that's really the sense that I got from him, from the questions that she asked him. It was kind of like, what do you want to do, and how are you going to take issues like trans athlete rights and this situation happening with Mahmoud Khalil. He didn't talk about those specifically, but they are really significant things that are dividing a party.
Big differences among Democrats about how to handle both of those.
Within households, I mean, the Latino community had an uproar when, Latino men voted for Trump overwhelmingly. And that's been something that I think a lot of us have had to wrestle with as well. So I think from him, it was just more a sense of like, hey, we need to get people back together, remember the things that matter to us, union rights, worker rights, families. And, it's a start, I think. We're happy that he was willing to talk with us about it. And we hope that we can have more conversations with him in the future.
Matt, you also reported on this for Western Mass Politics and Insight. And I'm going to quote you. Lau may need to draw from both his roots and where he got his political start in Western Mass to help his party out of the wilderness. Say more about that.
So Lau grew up in Queens, in I believe one of the East Asian ethnic enclaves of Queens. Queens has many immigrant communities. I mean, we could have a whole show on that.
Yes.
But and if you look, and what I looked at was the New York Times had put up a map showing all the precinct shifts from Democrat to Republican between 2020 and 2024. Now, I caution that some of those shifts can be a little bit deceiving because drops in turnout can drive a lot of that. I think you saw a lot of that in Massachusetts, not everywhere, but a lot of people just didn't vote in 24 that did in 20, and that makes the shift look more profound than it is. One place where there's other data that supports some of the shift is in New York City. They've had, they had city elections and the gubernatorial elections. They all show that communities such as Asian communities in Queens have shifted away from Democrats in almost every election. I mean, it's not a uniform shift from election to election because turnout varies, but there's been a very clear sense that whether it's a lack of engagement or a lack of taking certain issues seriously, such as public safety, that they've lost voters in those areas. And I think that, having grown up in communities like that, I would hope that Lau would be able to provide some perspective and maybe even be something of an ambassador for people, as I believe he's first generation American, to kind of say to the Democratic Party, this is what people are saying, and we have to respond to their needs. It has to be representative. And certainly, but at the same time, I think that Western Mass has been kind of a strange place compared to a lot of other, nationally. The shifts have not generally been as profound. It's remained as or even more Democratic in some places, and yet it's not. There's certainly exceptions. It's not rigidly ideological either, and I think that says something too about how people are really feeling about what they want from the party and from government. They're not necessarily looking to fight every meme war, and that has, I think, served politicians better in this area. And you could probably apply this to a lot of Massachusetts.
Larry, sorry, Matt. Larry, there was a headline in the Springfield Republican this weekend, an editorial. This is not the time for Democrats to, quote, play dead. And the piece concludes this way: Democrats would be at their best not by waiting for failure, but by unifying around a positive message of growth, optimism, tolerance, and fairness for the American people. That's what a true political party does.
Yeah, that was a reflection on this James Carville argument that play rope-a-dope, just kind of wait for the Trump administration's changes and directives.
They'll tucker themselves. It's the toddler approach.
Yes.
They'll tucker themselves out eventually, and then you'll go in and parent.
And maybe their tariff policies will have an effect on the financial markets. Maybe, right? Okay, that's already happened. Matt, in your really interesting piece on Roger Lau, I get a little nervous just as a public citizen when people start talking about turbocharging the message and deepening partnerships. I think a pretty good message didn't work for the Kamala Harris campaign. I really wonder, and I would love your thoughts on this, how do you get messages through these days?
Synergy, Larry.
Synergy? Oh, my God. Strike three.
Well, I think it's interesting what he said to Carrie Healy. It is partly about just being out there and being present. Being, in other countries, parties are like a part of the local milieu in many ways. And to be fair, both the Democratic and Republican Party were in this country. I don't know exactly when that kind of faded away. You can, point. The clearest example of how that maybe affected the local areas when local races became overwhelmingly nonpartisan. A thing that I think is overall good, but had an impact in terms of how the party had a relationship to neighborhoods and cities and towns. But I think that the other aspect of it is just kind of rediscovering where people are. There's not the media, and I hate to say this, certainly to a roundtable of media people, is not the convening force that it was.
No, absolutely not.
Especially now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So politicians need to either create their own or find new ones.
It was really interesting for me to see a headline in the Berkshire Eagle this week as we're talking about whether Democrats are playing dead or not, or the way people are responding to the Trump administration's calls to remove diversity, equity, inclusion statements from websites, or just DEI purging in general that's going on. Berkshire Eagle's Mary Jane Williams reported on a unanimous decision this week by the Pittsfield City Council. It declared Pittsfield a sanctuary city for transgender and gender-diverse people. The resolution affirms the city's commitment to protecting transgender rights and unwillingness to cooperate with federal policies targeting the community. Panel, what are your thoughts on this move in Pittsfield? Larry, former Berkshire Eagle reporter, by the way, and editor.
I think that community is speaking to its values, and that on that issue of trans rights and protecting that community from being targeted so blatantly by the Trump administration right out of the box, that may be, a whisper campaign by Democrats like, should we go there on that? And there's a debate to be had, but I think if you have to compromise your values of fairness and equality and opportunity, then you're twisted up in a knot from the start.
There was a transgender woman, Gwen Morgan, quoted in Mary Jane's piece, and she said, "I'm terrified. The current federal administration and their Project 2025 agenda have made it their goal to erase and eradicate my kind. There have always been transgender people, and there always will be. But we should not have to live in fear. This resolution is meant to give us a refuge, a respite from the hate directed at us."
Yeah. It's pretty heartbreaking. I think all of us have felt at some point or another that we are the other. You know, being a Puerto Rican woman, being a woman in general, has had its struggles, and so I really sympathize with the community. But I think even to the question that Carrie asked Lau at the end of the day, like, transgender rights are very divisive in the Democratic Party. We're a very liberal party, right? But there's still a lot of people that have those religious views that set them apart. So if he's able to bring people together on issues like that, I think we'd get somewhere.
Matt, as a political move, do you think that this was a move by the city council? Should city leaders be concerned about the impact that this could have on their federal funding?
Well, I mean, the short answer is yes. The long answer is it shouldn't. I mean, and I think this is where, you know, one of the things that I think will be interesting to watch is as these court cases start moving through the judicial process. I mean, so far we haven't seen like outright blatant ignoring of judicial orders, which is good, but they are certainly looking for exceptions wherever they can. And I think what the next step is going to be is they probably couldn't, you know, beat Massachusetts in court on, for example, its Massachusetts has a very strong transgender protection law. But what they could do is start harassing municipalities. Obviously, the city of Boston, you know, has somebody who can, you know, fight back pretty hard. But what about if they start going after a place like Pittsfield? What resources does Pittsfield have to, you know, resist? And I hate to use that term, but that is the correct, you know, phrasing here. What would just be an arbitrary attack on how they treat their own citizens and their own, you know, workers, for example. This is going to require, I think, a partnership between municipalities and the state, the Attorney General's office in particular. I think, you know, it's going to be important for her, to the extent it's legally possible, to step in and assist municipalities if they're facing these kinds of if they face, investigations or probes or just outright harassment from the federal government, and do whatever they can to push back. Because it's not that Pittsfield can't do anything by itself, but it's going to it might need help if it's going to be the focus.
All right. Well, I'm going to move us on to our scoop, praise, and prediction portion of the rundown, where we ask our panel to dish about a story they're working on, heap some praise on a newsworthy nugget, or make a prediction about the news. Larry Parnas.
Sure.
I'll start with you. Scoop,
right.
Praise, or prediction this morning. What's on your mind?
Thank you for the reminder about this when I came in this morning. I want to thank and praise our letter writers. We were talking about how the media isn't the kind of universal table setter for public debate. Letter writers are grappling with what's happening coming out of Washington right now, and they're doing it in our pages from diverse viewpoints. We have Trump supporters. We have Trump critics. Letters are really important. They help readers kind of interrogate their own thinking. They're far more engaging to readers than our editorials, though we are one of the few papers our size that still writes regular editorials. So a shout out to our letter writers. Keep them coming.
Liz Ramon.
Nirvani Williams from the NEPM Newsroom is working on a story. She met with a family from Afghanistan who's been dealing with resettlement issues with their children. Really impactful stuff. So that's coming next week. And it's Pie Day, and I made a pie, and it's really good, and hopefully it'll win this internal competition.
It is Pie Day. Matt Safransky, quickly.
Well, I don't have a pie, but I can preview that there is some labor unrest at the MGM Springfield, and there'll be more on that soon.
All right. I encourage everyone on Pi Day to check out Tristan Smith of Mass Lives piece to talk about 3.14 and all of its mathematical wonders. And thanks to my neighbor Spike for reminding me that it's Pi Day. You've been listening to The Rundown. I'm Carrie Saldo. Thanks to Liz Ramon, Larry Parnas, and Matt Safransky. Have a wonderful day. Go eat some pie, pizza or otherwise.